You take advantage. I wonder how much of that was actually caught.
I can get behind that, right?
Right. This is a good. That's as good a mentality to live by as any.
It's very good if it didn't get caught. That we reiterate, he did imply consent. That somebody wants to, not the taking advantage part. But yeah.
I said lets you. Is that not?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm just making sure it didn't get cut off.
It's like a little.
It might have been an endorsement of something far worse.
No, yeah, I don't endorse things.
We know. I shouldn't
Book
worry.
one of
You don't endorse
Fellowship of
anything.
the Ring. Is that what we're actually talking? Did we decide that's what we're doing?
Yes.
The
Like
notification.
5 minutes ago.
The notification informed me for certain what we were doing.
Oh, I didn't know we were decided.
See?
It's official because now it's Facebook official. Like, what the title is.
I don't think it. No, it's YouTube official. That's totally different kind of official.
I was kind of hoping it wasn't, just because I
Didn't read
I
it.
just got past the book of the Bombadil place, so still had like an hour more of book one.
I mean, fucking ass. I could fix it. We can do a no topic. I can change the title. I just like, how far were people reading?
Yeah,
Right, chat
really,
and watch-
dude.
I think when you were asking, I was talking to my friend about the TV being too loud or something, and then he was fixing some headphones.
This is what happens when you don't come to staff meetings 5 minutes before the show starts. No, just
I was the most
just do
unprepared
it.
person
But
today.
it's not like we don't know what the story is, guys.
That's true.
Like, what happened in that hour, Andreas? Did you miss were you gonna miss a bunch more of them being on the road? Were you gonna miss 2 or 3 more songs? Like, really, what plot are you missing in an hour? Tom Bombadil is
I was going to say he takes up a lot of time.
But I know what happens from the movie, right? This is like I'm missing the chapter Strider, A Knife in the Dark, and Flight to the Ford.
I mean, those were some of the better chapters I read.
So, is that what we should start with? The fact that the movie did the right choice in cutting out Tom Bombadil entirely.
That was a great choice.
Bombadil.
It's totally necessary.
I don't dislike Bombadil, but it was huge tonal shift. Of like, I was like, this is a big doom existential crisis, and then we're gonna just stop for several days in the woods and sing songs. It's like maybe.
Which audiobooks did Alex? You read it, I guess, physically.
Yes.
Justin.
BBC radio drama, so I'm gonna have to do better next time. Because I finished The Lord of the Rings in 4 hours, and I'm like, wait a minute, there's a lot more to this. Where was Tom Bombadil? And I'm starting to think that like the movies were almost like templated off of this BBC play. Like he grew up with it or got the script or something. Because there was a lot that was like, wait a minute, this is way too similar. Like, obviously it's the same source material, but some of the cuts were the same, some of the focuses were the same. The BBC at least like kept the whole part where like Gandalf gets kidnapped before they even leave, and all of that stuff that actually happens in the book. And so at first I was thinking it was okay, and like it had the songs and stuff, and then I was like, no, I mean, it's been a while, but this is missing some things. And then all of a sudden it ended, and I'm like, wait a minute, like where's the rest of it? Because my first clue was the fact that it didn't take like 12 hours to like get out of the Shire, because we didn't tell you where the dwarves hung their coats and the 85 guests from the one side, and just like how crazy he goes into detail, and I'm like, wait a minute, they're glossing over all this detail.
No, if you want to be faithful, you would have to do like a 10-year miniseries type thing in order to
capture how long Gandalf was gone while Frodo had the ring. Just 17 years.
to have the time. Yeah,
that's one of these days we're going to be brave enough that we're going to have a real artist. Like, they're going to get a wizard, they're going to have him fuck off for 20 years, 40 years, and age him up like in real time, and then bring him back. It's just like, it's ridiculous. And it's funny too, because like the book and the movie really kind of gloss over that, right? The fact that, like, in the book, it's like, oh, P.S. Gandalf was gone for like 40 years. And it's like, Jesus Christ, dude.
Well, that's the thing. You don't really have to.
In the kingdom.
You don't really have to age any of these people up, because they're all long-lived people anyway. That it's like, I mean, Gandalf's going to look like
I'm
an
doing
old man
it for
no
the
matter
art.
No,
I'm doing
the
it
art,
for the art.
Forget the art. The art is stupid.
It makes perfect sense why they didn't try to capture any form of the time passage other than a few weeks in the movie. But also, it's just like Gandalf has this feeling, he's giving these hints like, this is really big and this is really important. This could be the end of the world. And then he goes away for 17 years. It's like, this doesn't seem so pressing.
Listen, the end of the world is vague. It's not necessarily immediate.
Yeah, well, and so the thing that I especially noticed, like with Rings of Power, to invoke that, so everybody can be mad at me for that now, but like that's the thing that it's like they never really get a proper sense of scale. Like this is just one of the things that Tolkien does, that it's like this shit happened over the course of thousands of years, right? Like Gandalf has supposedly been directly involved with fighting Sauron since the Second Age, like 1,000 years ago, or 3,000 years ago, I guess, if we take Elrond's word for it, right? So it's like, yeah, okay, the world is ending. It's been ending for 3,000 years. Like today, do I have time for a sandwich? So we're talking
and then all
about
the Morgoth stuff. I mean,
beings.
The world has almost come to an end like 6 times by this point.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I mean, the Ungoliant eating the trees and him breaking the lanterns. It's like, yeah, he's tried to blow up the world like 7 times already by this point, and that's Sauron's boss. So it's like even bigger.
Right. Yeah. So but I agree with you in the sense that it's just like I don't know, like, does it add anything to the story to have those couple of chapters or whatever in the beginning where it's like, P.S. Bilbo had a party and then Gandalf fucked off for 17 years? I mean, it's like, could we have started after that? Like
those chapters, they showed like, so Frodo he had the ring with him. He didn't put it on, but he stopped aging for even like, yes, he was young and hobbits are long lived, but he still looked as like the age of majority, which was 33. He still looked the equivalent of an 18-year-old. For 17 years.
Right.
And that's like, okay, so noticing that something's a bit strange there. The feeling of the Shire maybe was a really important thing to try to capture as to why it was so homey and why he doesn't want to leave. And just,
it's like, yeah, this is what we're fighting for type deal.
Yeah. And
I mean, if we look at it like meta-wise, like Tolkien's motivation, I think he said in interviews that he just wanted to make it long.
Which is fine.
I don't ever remember hearing that, but okay.
I'm fairly, this is from my friend who's like super into Lord of the Rings, who told me that so.
I mean, the other way you could go is if you were to do this, series, theoretically speaking, if we're redoing Lord of the Rings as a visual medium, you could start it after the 17 years and have like a flashback to the party type deal. So that way you still get both elements, but it's not, you don't have an actual gap.
Yeah. The party's a lot of fun. Starting there, I think, was actually a good idea to introduce everyone. And the idea, like the fireworks was something that they put into the movies, not something in the books.
Right.
Worth it though. It captured a lot of atmosphere and feeling.
I think you also get a feeling of, as you go through these chapters, that he wrote this over a pretty long period of time. Back for they kind of feel very self-contained. I feel like a lot of the chapters, like, okay, he's written this chapter and this chapter, and then he's like, they get melded together. Like they're not as flowing as more contemporary fantasy as I'm used to, with how it all connects together. And I could really just do without the songs. really, really good.
You don't like book musicals?
So you're listening to an audiobook of the songs.
I feel like that would be better, and I hate audiobooks, but like seems like if you're gonna engage with the songs, actually having them sung wouldn't be the worst.
I'm listening to Andy Serkis, and he's a good voice actor, and he does the songs reasonable. But whenever he starts singing, I'm just like, I just kind of tune out and wait for it to be over.
I think Christopher Lee did a version too, didn't he? He narrated these at some point, so maybe try his too.
I mean, the songs aren't bad, as in he writes them very well. They're entertaining just to read on their own, very good lyricists and all that. But sometimes they are, again, a tonal shift of like, in the middle of doom and gloom, let's have a happy song about a cat and a fiddle.
I mean, medieval times, what else were you going to do? You couldn't flip on your iPhone, so. You sung a jaunty tune. That's what passed
Yeah.
the time.
Although I'm becoming impressed with every single character seems to be able to burst into song at any point, even translating them on the fly, according to some of them,
Hmm.
and they still rhyme.
They're smarter than we are. So I mean, but that is there is a little bit of like lore to that sort of thing anyway. Like in Tolkien's world, everything is entropy, right? You know, like the Valar, you know, had the elves, which kind of, you know, like they didn't live up to their expectations, and then, you know, gnomes, dwarves, men, it's all downward spiral, and like you're never able to live up to like the kings of Numenor, right? Even though they were like men or at least half men and that sort of thing. Like it's always like kind of a downward spiral, and that's like what Elrond is worried about too, with you know, Arwen and stuff like later on, and just the whole overarching thing with that. But yeah, it's always interesting to think about it in that sense, because then it's like it gets to us, you know, theoretically, and it's like, man, you know, like Aragorn is like, you know, 80, right? Frodo's 50, you know, they're just starting their adventure in some ways. Like Strider's been around, obviously, but Frodo, like this is his big adventure at 50. You know, it's just like, yeah, dude, you should be way too old for this. And even if he's got the ring to keep him supernaturally young, Sam isn't. You know, Merry and Pippin aren't, not really. You know,
Pippin is still young, like he might not be an age adult for a hobbit. They keep making fun of him for being young.
well, but who is it that Frodo was moving in with? Because it's like they're landed dudes as well, right? Like it's kind of a subtle takeaway, but like he's moving into his estate with him, and so it's like these are his rich buddies.
It must have been
moving in with.
Mary, because he was moving towards the area where Mary's family owned it.
Sure.
I think it was a small house. That's why Mary went ahead to set up the house in preparation for his move. That was actually just like, now we're going to go away for who knows how long.
Yeah, more like storing his stuff at his buddy's place or whatever. But yeah, so yeah, it's funny too, because like I think I was talking to you about it a couple of weeks ago, where it's like, or maybe it was my brother, but it's like, keep in mind, like this is Tolkien's idealism, right? Like he goes on and on and on about how the hobbits are great and all of this stuff, and they've got the perfect life. And then look at the life that Frodo is living, right? Frodo's still like the 1% of 1% of hobbits by virtue of inheritance and money. Is Sam living the hobbit life, that he's literally just like a hired hand? And it's like, that's great that he's a gardener and he gets to take care of this one place like his entire life, and that's how he makes money apparently, or whatever. But it's like Sam is a servant. Like that's such a colonial Britain thing to be like, yes, we should all live like hobbits and we should all have hand servants and we should all be like, bro,
yes.
like what is a
I
servant?
too would like a servant.
That? Like,
I was gonna say, if Andreas wants to come and be my servant, then I'll sponsor his visa. That'd be fine with me.
Pay him in Costco pizza.
Yeah, yeah.
And anything
Or just
for you-
don't pay him at all. Even better.
Anything for you, Master EG.
See, he's got it down pat already.
This is working.
That's perfect.
I think there's also some in terms of the singing we're talking about some like there's some lore in that. This is again my Lord of the Rings friend who told me that the whole of the Lord of the Rings and everything, the whole world, everything as it unfolds is the god of the world singing.
Yeah, all of reality is essentially created by a song that gets fucked up twice by Melkor, who is Sauron's boss. And then on the third time, it finally sticks because they kick him out of the song. But so yeah, they basically had the world twice. It didn't work out so well. And yeah, now we're here. Well, now we're back there in the before the first age. And
There and back again.
well, I mean, you got to the timeline for Lord of the Rings. It's like, so there's nothing except Eru, Iluvatar, and then he starts singing and he creates like the Valar, who are the 12 gods. You know, you think of your Olympian type people, and then they start creating, quote unquote, and they're off living in their own little dimension thing. And
Is that
they
where
have,
the elves are from?
Well, yeah, Valinor
Yeah,
is
I was
the
gonna
home of the
say-
Valar.
Yeah, they're in Valinor. It's not a dimension, but I don't know. It's always weird. It's really hard to pin down. But
Well, for the
yeah.
sake of what it is before they start making concrete shit, and then it's like Valinor's there, and then the Earth is forming, and all that other crap. And then they got these big lamps instead of the sun and the moon. And
The trees?
It's the lamps first, and then the trees.
Mm.
So they got these big lamps that represent light, and Melkor doesn't like that, and because he's cranky pants, and he destroys them. And then they make the trees to do the light, and then he doesn't like that, so he gets the giant spider, who's not Shelob, but like an even bigger version, like an eldritch horror that just happens to take the form of a massive spider to eat the trees and all the light. And before that happens, the light is captured in the Silmarils, which is what Fëanor creates, and that causes all the problems later on. So yeah, there's just
Then they make rings that makes them immortal longer. Is what I learned in Rings of Power.
Right.
God.
Well, yeah, it again entropy, but one of the things that was wild about revisiting it through Rings of Power again, was it was funny thinking about it, that it's like the sun is being carted around the sky by an elf. The reason why the sun and the moon and all of that shit burns orcs is because it's literally elf magic. It's not just like, oh, well, sun good and evil bad, and therefore the sun drives off the evil. It's like, it's why elvish blades are better, and elvish magic and elvish rope burns them, and all of that shit is because elvish magic is literally the antithesis of orcs, and the sun is literally fucking elf magic. And I was like, oh, dang, that's a big takeaway. But we're a little far afield from, Bree.
The Lord of the Rings.
The Lord of the Rings.
I mean, the way I understand, how Tolkien went about this, right, is like he was basically, he's a linguist and he's kind of like a world building nut. He wrote Lord of the Rings to use all this world that he had already made, right? Like he didn't really have a story and then want to build a world for it. It was very much the other way around, where he had all this lore and languages and everything, and then he wrote a story for it.
He really wanted to focus on the folklore that he loved, and he loved England. He was trying to build an English-ish folklore, at least as according to the foreword in my version of the book. And he found that there's not much English folklore that was English instead of Norse or Breton or Welsh. And so he was kind of disappointed. And one of the only things that it seemed like he was able to do was make that Cat and the Fiddle little rhyme that we don't really know where it came from, and he tried to make that into a cohesive story. And so that's one of the songs that Frodo did at Bree, and trying to give more to it because he wished that there was more there of his beloved country.
Oh, it's funny because Gandalf is obviously based off of Merlin, which is a Welsh origin. It's like,
Right.
okay.
And I mean, Merlin, Odin, Gandalf is one of Odin's names. It's definitely pulling from Norse mythology a lot.
Mhm.
I didn't totally pick a perfect shirt for today. That's fine. So, yeah. I unfortunately don't have a Lord of the Rings shirt, so it was like this or D&D, but I was like, the one eye, come on.
Yeah.
So
Fits on multiple levels.
Oh, I think I only have the one Lord of the Rings shirt, and it's the Pokemon shirt where it's Gandalf and the Balrog, and it's, run, flee, shall not pass as your options.
Nice.
I think that's the only one I have. It's okay. I'll work on getting more.
I got to get me a Balrog shirt. That would be awesome.
Now we know what to give you for Christmas.
Balrog
There
shirt.
you go.
Yeah.
We'll totally remember in 10 months.
I was going to say, that's definitely not on the list of approved gifts for $20 to
Right.
$25.
Yeah.
Didn't say it had to fit.
Oh, okay. You know what? We'll get you a blank shirt and like your own decal, and you can iron it on yourself.
Oh, there you go.
Oh, yeah. To go back to Bombadil, because it stands out as to
Do
he
we
was,
have to?
what this, like,
For you.
he was so weird. The songs were very well written, but it's just this
Were
weird,
they?
like crazy tonal shift. Yeah, like maybe try
Just
reading
because
it.
you didn't like them doesn't
Yeah,
mean that
like-
they weren't written.
Maybe it's just because what I remember the most is his like nonsensical singing he was doing all the time. Like he was, and Andy Serkis's rendition of it is kind of really over the top. I'm Tom
Yeah.
Bombadil, but my shirt is yellow.
Yeah, that's pretty much what a lot of the songs were. But it was some weird rhyming riddles of like, how about Mr. Willow? Don't drown that hobbit because we want him to be alive. And then they just hang out and have a party for 3 days, and then he sets them off, and it's just felt much more childish. And maybe it was like an older story written for his children or something that he inserted it back in or something, because he gives them a rhyme of if you're ever in trouble, say these things. And then they go get attacked by a Barrow Wight, and then they say those things, and he comes and saves them, and then just delivers them to Bree. It's like you could have just gone straight to Bree. Like, it's weird when something as interesting as a Barrow Wight became boring because it meant nothing. Because of course Bombadil was there to save them.
Yeah.
So when you hang out with a wood druid who's giving you ayahuasca, what are you gonna do?
You get drunk on magic water. Or whatever.
And he can put on the ring and be completely fine. It's just, why not leave the ring with him?
Well, yeah, because he doesn't want the power, right? I think
No
is
one does.
one of the no. Yeah, there's a difference though. No one admits to wanting the power. He truly doesn't want the power in his soul. Like you don't think that Gandalf and Galadriel would stand there ad nauseum and say, nope, nope, nope. But it's like, look, dude, I'm about to give you $1 billion in hard cash. Okay. Just a little piece of your soul. That's all we're talking about, right? I just need a foothold to work over for the next 300 years. Okay. That's it.
Fine.
$1 billion. Who would fucking say no to that? Who would truly, unironically, full on Captain America, Bilbo, whatever, Tom Bombadil say no? Because Gandalf wouldn't and Galadriel wouldn't.
I was going to say,
And they've been fighting
they're
this shit.
cognizant enough to admit it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and they've been fighting this shit for 5,000 years.
They do kind
right?
of say no, though, right?
Well, yes, they do,
Well,
but they're also
yeah.
like Sauron doesn't, and he doesn't even come close to the ring.
But the other difference is Galadriel does say no, but she was tempted. Tom Bombadil's not even tempted. That's what I'm saying. Like, ultimately,
Yeah.
you know, like that's like me coming to your house with the pallets and pallets of money and saying, "Here's $1 billion," and you were like, "Fucking torch it." It's literally worthless. It's not even worth the heat it would generate. Tom Bombadil could not give a shit about the ring. You know, whereas like Galadriel and Gandalf are like, I mean, a little bit. Like, would it hurt for a minute? Well, of course it would hurt for a minute. And then they denounce it, and then they were like, yeah, Frodo, you keep that shit because it's going to corrupt you too, we assume, but it's going to take a whole lot longer to do it. And that's part of why the hobbits had to be the ring bearers, is because they didn't even necessarily want the power, but they were still like open to those influences eventually.
Just slower.
You
Right?
know,
What about Aragorn? Well, we haven't.
because he
that's
would take
more
it
from the-
immediately. Like,
that's more from the movies than the books.
I think so.
The movie implication is that he's not corruptible by the ring.
Well, he's
Well,
afraid
it's more
of
that
it.
he's afraid of it, so he doesn't want that. Like, yes, he sort of folds Frodo's hand over in the movie and does that whole, I'm going to let you go thing, which he has the strength of character to do, but it's like he's also very afraid because of all the history in his bloodline.
Yeah.
and it's a foil of Boromir, right? Literally, Boromir is there as a foil to Aragorn directly. Boromir is a pretender at the end of the day, right? Like, he's brave at the end and all of that stuff. Don't let me like besmirch his character too far, but he is literally there as a foil and a pretender to what Aragorn actually is, and Aragorn's trying to avoid, right? Aragorn is actually the king. He is the actual heir, but he doesn't want it. And Boromir is not, but he does want it, right? They're literally directly, across from each other. And Aragorn at no point is pretending. He's pretending to not be the king, but he's not pretending his bravery, his skills, and all of those things. Whereas Boromir is afraid he would be found out at any point in time, up until the final stand. He really kind of redeems himself there in some ways, in my opinion. But up to that point, yeah.
Now that we keep doing all this comparison, I have this thought that like when we're doing book 1 today, and then we're doing book 2 soon, TM, whenever that may be. Would it be interesting once we've done that, then watch the first one of the movies to compare to the books?
I mean, you don't have to convince me to watch Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, I watched it last night because I had gotten caught up to the point of what we said, and it was like, okay, now I need to compare it because everything I remember is very spot on. And I have to say, the Peter Jackson movies are extremely faithful to the book. Like, other than the cutting out of Bombadil,
Fellowship is pretty good. There's a
I
little
haven't
bit
gotten
of
to the other ones yet, but
Yeah.
there's so many small details that they kept in the
Right.
extended version, other than Bombadil. And those two caveats.
Shadowfax. Yeah.
I haven't seen Shadowfax yet in the book.
Oh,
But,
okay. You're not
like,
that far.
Yeah, so the
Hmm.
book 1 of the Fellowship ends right when they get to Rivendell.
I thought he had Shadowfax by then, though, right? Because he's kept
We
in the
haven't
Tower
seen
of
Gandalf
Orthanc.
since he left the Shire because he's been missing. And there's a
Oh, they
possibility
must
that
have
they're
done
trying-
that in the radio play then. They like conflated it again because like they do the whole Tower of Orthanc thing, and that's part of the justification why Gandalf is gone. Like in the radio play, like this all happens before he had made it to Bree and he went to go get Shadowfax. That's why I'm saying, like, I feel like he really took some steps from whatever they did in this BBC play, because the play, it came out in like the mid 80s or late 80s, and it's just like,
I think-
my dude, like,
The book fully centers around Frodo, right? Like we never get anything that's not told to Frodo.
okay.
Oh, there are some
Well, not
points
until
when
they
the
split off
narrative-
in the second book. That's when you get
There's
more
some
of-
points when the narrative becomes third person omniscient, but it doesn't leave Frodo and his party. It doesn't follow Strider as he's wandering around doing ranger stuff while the hobbits are waiting somewhere. It always stays with Frodo and the hobbits. But then it
Gotcha.
might insert information that you can't possibly know unless it was a third person omniscient. Like what happened to the ponies. Like the ponies got stolen at Bree, and then they got brought back, and they had an actually pretty good life compared to every other pony, because they avoided a very
It's
terrible
important
journey.
to know that.
It's to Jonathan's point from earlier that it's like Tolkien wrote these at least partially for his kids. That is totally something you would tell like a small child to be like,
Yeah.
the ponies weren't actually harmed at this time, to borrow it from Princess Bride. We're like, I'm just telling you because you look worried,
Yeah.
So he
There were no
has
dogs
to
hurt.
write this whole side adventure. Be like, did the Nazgul eat the ponies? No.
Well, it becomes less of
no.
an issue as time goes on, because the Hobbit was very much for his kids, and these ones were like, yeah, his kids are growing up now, and
Sure.
but there's also old people that are going to read this, and
Yes.
but even in the movie where he's like, Bill's going to be fine when they send him off from Moria.
Yeah.
30 seconds before the Watcher takes them.
But you know
True
what? Bill
forward.
was gone. Bill couldn't deal with that shit. He was not having that.
Right?
He knew what to do. It's like,
It's
screw
all
this.
actually-
I had.
I don't want to
um,
fight a Kraken. I'm out.
God no. It seemed like Tolkien was writing a lot of the books and then sending it to his son who was active in World War II. Like, so as part of like I was just sending letters, but like a little bit of entertainment of while you're trying to survive World War II, go have Frodo try to survive that journey as well.
Well, you got to imagine from his dad, who was sitting in the trenches in World War I and didn't have that kind of distraction. It was probably helpful.
Yeah.
To some degree.
But the movies are still extremely faithful. Like really small details of like, yes, they're just walking for days and days. Like after they leave Bree and they're trying to get to Rivendell, it's like they go through the mountains and the woods, and then they go through a marsh. And like watching the extended version last night is like it showed all of those things. Here are the mountains, and here is the marsh and the midges, and here's the tower. It's like they went through a lot of effort to be extremely faithful.
But they did Sam dirty. So that's another one too. So
How so?
on Weathertop, the fire was Strider's idea, not
Yes.
Sam cooking breakfast because he's a big fat hobbit.
I don't
Oh,
think they
it's
did
like-
Sam dirty in the movies. I'm pretty sure that was a Merry and Pippin idea. And
Yeah,
Sam was just like,
um,
yeah, I'm going to eat, though.
But you're true.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah.
Which, to be fair,
And look, man, they're dumb enough on their own without adding more dumb, like I love the memes where it's like it's Gandalf talking to him later, like in Return of the King or whatever. It'd be like, oh yeah, I totally need you to do this. Why? Because the fucking helmet or the bucket, like whatever. Like because I'm still not over it. Like I
Because
died,
you got me
asshole.
killed, you little
Yes.
shit.
Right. Those have been some of my favorite.
He's like,
memes
yeah,
lately.
but I saved you later, sort of in Gondor, right? It's like, okay, but no.
What was the
Fool of a Duke.
Oh yeah,
I mean,
but you're right in that they kind of maligned the hobbits with the fire thing, because in fact in the book Strider kept telling them to have fire around because fire was antithesis to the riders, and like it was
Right.
going to keep them away and at bay. And that's why they're traveling during the daylight, and fire was good, so have more fire. It wasn't, even though it does make sense if you don't know that of like,
well, that's
don't
just a
leak like a
change
signal.
to the
Since
nature
I haven't
then.
gotten I haven't gotten to that in the. So I guess in the book they just come upon them. It's not really explained. Like in the movie, it's the fire. They see them because of the fire.
Oh, they've
But
been
in the
tracking
books-
them for days and days. That's like they were there at Bree. They were
And-
tracking them from the Shire. The riders have
Yeah, so
been
they just
hounding
they
them.
just catch up to them, right?
Well, and in the book, he assumes that they may even be there waiting for him. That he's like, we need to go to Weathertop because that's the most likely place that Gandalf's going to find us. But they may have already been there and may be looking for us there anyway. So it's definitely a gamble in the book, from what I remember. But the fire was absolutely a tactical thing, not a we're dumb hobbits and got to eat thing. So I'm just poking at it. I love the movies, but like if you want to be a purist and whatever, like there are a bunch of these little baubles that he does, and there's even more in the Two Towers, in my opinion. Like Fellowship of the Ring it's so good, right? He obviously like he does character substitution. Everybody rags on the fjord thing and all of that stuff, but
I think that was fine. But I mean, so Arwen being the person to come get Frodo and do the fjord and the magic, like I love that moment in the movie. It is fantastic.
right.
I don't know who Glorfindel is, and so therefore I don't feel the loss of this character for it to be substituted with Arwen.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, the movie's going so we're setting her up because she's not really going to have that much screen time comparatively. Versus if you have it be Glorfindel, who's literally not going to go because he's too much of like a beacon. Like he can't be in the Fellowship because he's just that big of a beacon for dark forces to draw attention to him. Because he's like Gandalf, he's died and come back, and he's got he's like a little bit more than an elf.
Yeah, it's again, I don't know this person. I haven't read this description of him other than him coming upon them and sticking Frodo on the horse and send it away.
So yeah,
Not
it makes
even
sense that Arwen's doing whatever. And like the thing with the fire with the hobbits, it's like we're establishing these guys really don't know shit about the world. This is their progression as to, by the time we get to Return of the King and they're savvy war veterans who know who would never make that mistake again. But here, they're just hobbits.
Yeah. And
Bye.
I don't know. How much of if Glorfindel was a character that should have been there if he doesn't get to stick around versus we get to have this feeling of Arwen for longer, like the screen time, but the importance of her connection to Aragorn and her importance to him,
Right.
like that matters a lot.
From a movie standpoint, it makes sense. It's not one of the substitutions that I personally have a problem with and that sort of thing. From a story standpoint and just like storytelling in general, not everything needs to be all wrapped up in a bow for you. That's not how real life works. That's not how the world works, right? Glorfindel has been running around being a badass for 5,000 years. Just because you don't know who the fuck he is, that's how life works, right? Like you don't know half of the generals on the chiefs of staff, but if he shows up to pull your ass out of the river, you say, "Sir, yes, sir," and move on, right? I'm just drawing some parallels to like other kinds of situations and whatever, but it's like, because like Galadriel, right? We just know Galadriel is like the elf queen witch that gives them a bunch of shit in the forest and whatever, but it's like she has been fighting Sauron for thousands of years, right? Sometimes literally. And that's kind of the depth and the fun of the Lord of the Rings world, but it is a problem if you take just the snapshot of just the Lord of the Rings the book and then just be like, oh yeah, I have no idea who the hell these people are. So it's, again, from a movie standpoint, it makes all the sense in the world because it needs to be streamlined, and the less open threads you have, the better people tend to enjoy it. But from like a book standpoint and just like narrative in general, not everybody should know everybody, right? Frodo shouldn't have a cousin in Rune, and he shouldn't have friends in the North and just whatever, and be like, oh yeah, Strider came to my birthday party. Like there's flaws with that kind of storytelling too. It's totally cool that Glorfindel is just this elf hero that shows up and saves him, in my opinion, yeah. What were you going to say, Andreas?
I think that unlike a lot of other movies that get made, or movies that are based on books, where it gets too streamlined and too much is cut, like for at the top of my head is Harry Potter, because I grew up with Harry Potter. That's what got me into reading. That since the Lord of the Rings movies, especially the extended versions, are all still so long, and he really put on a lot of fat in the books. I almost feel like the movies, the streamlined version of it, is the better story than the actual books. It might be heresy to say, I don't know, but
Well, I mean, there's every time you do another touch on the same story, you can have, it's an opportunity for refining it. And there's something to be said of, instead of having to put effort in reading all of the words of their marching through the Midge March or whatever that's eating them, I could just watch them suffer, and it's a little bit less brain power that takes from me, and it's a bit more fun that way. And so it can be the more fun version, and I don't know, just anytime you do an edit, it can be better. You could also make it worse, but they've had how many years by the time that the books had come out to when those movies were made? What, 60, 70 years? Like, to the giving all of the opinions and all of the people like coalescing into like, maybe this was a bit too rough. Maybe that could be cut. Maybe this could be made better. Like, whatever. It's like they had a lot of opportunity into those movies, and they did it very well.
yeah. It's another semi-hot take is maybe that I've watched all the extended movies versions recently, and I almost feel like the first one, like Lord of the Rings, is better non-extended, and the others are better extended. But I do like the extended version too. I've only watched it like the really, really, absolutely everything one time. So I need to watch them again. That's why when we're done with reading the book, we're gonna watch the movie, and we're gonna talk about it, and yeah, it's gonna be great.
Yeah, I don't hate the theatrical. I mean, obviously that's what I saw first, so I'm never gonna say I dislike them. And there's merits to the way it was cut down, but there are things even in Fellowship where it's like, I mean, so they're talking about Mithril before the reveal of that when Frodo gets skewered that he's wearing it. It's like, so I could see why someone would be like, oh, well, you've now telegraphed that he has that again, rather than the audience kind of forgetting. And it's like, oh shit, that's right, he had that on. So like that might be a little better in the theatrical for some people, but all in all, I'm still probably a big proponent of the theatrical ones, the extended ones.
They do that in the book too, though, right? Don't they? Like Gimli's talking about,
like
they talk about. Oh, okay. Yeah. I think they talk about like, oh, what did they mine? And oh yeah, they mined Mithril and all this shit. And Frodo's over there like jingle, 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 and you're definitely supposed to forget until they're like, oh my god, Frodo got killed. This is the worst story ever. And then they're like, holy shit.
To be fair, it wouldn't have been the worst story ever if he got killed. But
well, that was Strider. He was the one freaking out. So
I mean, yeah, but he's friends with him, and I'm not friends with Frodo, so I would have been fine if he died.
Well, yeah.
So yes, Moria is in book 2 of book 1, and so I haven't read that far yet. But
Gotcha.
Strider, I've seen comments that the characters from book to movie are very different. I haven't gotten to see much of it, but one thing is, in particular, they call him Strider a lot before calling him Aragorn.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I didn't remember that from the movies almost at all. It's like, oh, that's just one of his names. But I thought it was like, it's there for like 2 minutes and then gone. Well,
no, they call him, especially Sam and Frodo are calling him Strider even through to Moria. And then after
Really?
that, it's like,
I don't
Yeah.
remember. I feel like Rivendell onwards is Aragorn.
Yeah.
Before
No,
that-
they call him Strider specifically when shit's going down with the cave troll. One of them
Gotcha.
calls him Strider still.
Huh, I'll have to go back to that.
I didn't pay that close attention. Now I do. So Viggo Mortensen is perfect, right? This is nothing on him, whatever.
As a
But,
human being.
yeah, he's just better than normal people. He's
Right.
literally a son of Numenor. Like, do you have any idea how difficult that casting was? But Strider at Bree is some of my favorite stuff from the first book as well, because like talk about having a bluff skill. Like the way that I remember it, and granted, this is, like a 20-year-old memory basically, but it's like, so he's the classic D&D rough looking guy in the corner, smoking his pipe with his hood drawn and whatever, and giving the hobbits the creeps and whatever. He comes and, he whisks them away and basically, lays the decoy for the Nazgul. But the whole time the hobbits are like, I think Sam especially is like freaking out that it's like, oh my God, he's got a sword and whatever. And at some point he pulls it and he's like, it's broke though. you
Yeah.
know, and he's just walking fucking around like a badass, but he's got a broken sword. And it's just like everybody's like, ooh, creepy Strider, ooh, don't mess with this guy. It was shit like that I was fine with. I was like, that's badass right there. Like Rangers are fantastic.
And that was because those were the shards of Narsil, and he
Right.
was more willing to at least have the heirlooms and
Yeah,
accept that this is his
Is
bloodline. But
interesting.
In the
Yeah,
movie,
they
obviously
make
it's
a very
different.
different choice in the movies, there, right? He doesn't get the blade until the third book, whereas in
Well,
in
because
the-
it's
it's
reforged in the
yeah,
third.
this is reforged before they leave for the whole journey.
Oh yeah, no, he has the full sword when he goes to like Theoden, and he makes a very big point of saying, if you do anything to this sword, I'm going to kill you, when they take their weapons before they go into Theoden in the books.
Mhm.
Because it's reforged and ready to go, and he's already sort of like accepted this is what he's going to do and be sort of.
Interesting. It'll be interesting to examine further, but I did find it strange that he had Narsil with him what I grew up with was that he was reluctant to take it. He didn't want to touch it. He didn't want to be the heir of Isildur. He didn't want to have that heritage in any way. But he does outright say, I am Aragorn, son of Arathorn, but the hobbits don't know who that is. And so
Right.
the declaration doesn't mean much, but he's not hiding from it as much as he is in the movies. He's not like he.
It's kind of also how, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt your train of
You're
thought,
fine.
but it's like all of them get introduced that way, right? Like, Frodo's parentage, this is Gimli, son of Glóin, all of it, right? It's, like all
Well, yeah,
of
it's as
them,
much for
like,
our benefit as it
Lego-
is for theirs.
yeah, Legolas, son of Thranduil, and it's like, yeah, I had no idea who the F that was in the Lord of the Rings and all of that stuff. So,
Mhm.
Again, it's just the world, it's like world building stuff. And then later on, I think when they're at Rivendell, when Gandalf's like, oh, by the way, let me tell you a brief history of the last 3,000 years. P.S. That's his kid, or like, ancestor,
Yeah.
or whatever. But
There's some other bits, like, I guess if you've only read this book and you didn't know anything, you wouldn't know who Aragorn and Arathorn are. But he has told the story of Beren and Luthien. And if you knew to follow that down, that's also his ancestors.
Mhm.
right.
But, like, again, you don't know that Isildur generation, and then Aragorn, but until probably later. It's just like I happened to put those all together because I knew. But,
Right.
yeah, I'm cheating, essentially.
Well, for me, the takeaway there is that, like, I enjoy almost as much as anything these days the world building of a story more than just the characters or even the actions and that sort of thing. And Lord of the Rings is huge bait for people who like the world building, right? Because this isn't like, the Dresden Files is like written in our world, so we kind of know what the history is, or we could go with Codex Alera or something like that, another like high fantasy whatever, and it's like, okay, we kind of know where this world diverged in what happened there, but that's like a paragraph of history and world building. Whereas like the Lord of the Rings is like, hey, do you not know who this guy is? Boy, do I have the next 20 books for you. And you're probably going to be bored reading them half of the time, but it is going to answer your question, and it's just like so much stuff. And like a ton of stuff is connected, but not necessarily in like, I don't know. the part I'm leaving unsaid is like Dave Filoni, everybody knows everybody in his universe, right? Like if you've been watching Star Wars, like you've got like, oh, Ahsoka knew these clones, that knew Skywalker, that knew that there were 40 more Jedi, that Yoda really knew when he said, no, really, you're the last Jedi type of stuff, right? Lord of the Rings isn't like that, you know, like not everybody knows everybody, but things all kind of like flow together anyway.
Which
The
is even
generation
more
just travel
egregious in a
very fast.
galaxy versus a world.
Well, sure. Yeah, for sure. But like, you know, that stuff in The Hobbit, you know, not just like the ring, but even like the swords and stuff like that. Like the fact that the trolls happens in The Hobbit and then gets referenced again because they're on a similar path. So they're like, hey, wait a minute, aren't these the trolls that you killed and told us about? And this is where you got them swords and all that shit. Like some of that's fun. And like if you know just even from The Hobbit, then you know that story, you know, let alone who the hell Thranduil is and all of Aragorn's parentage for the last, you know, 3,000 years and whatever. But yeah.
And, you know, there's plenty of places they don't and can't go. Like they don't go east. They can't go to
Right.
Numenor because that's fucking gone.
Loads of questions about Valinor, right? Because it's like you get even like a taste of like what the coast is, but even like that's not even the half of it, right? You know, even only like the best elves get to go west from there. You know, like they talk about the far shores and what a fucking paradise it is, but that's just where the high elves live. That's not where the gods are. That's not where the Valar are. You know, but like in the Silmarillion and other stories like that, elves actually go over there and tell their gods off and shit, you know, like there's so much, you know, there's so much. Like I made it this far into one of them like 10 years ago, and that's where I left off. So
You know, it's funny the people who like want to criticize this stuff and will make it like, you know, allegories to the negative side of things. You know, like the dwarves being allegories for Jews and their all that stuff. But it's like, well, I mean, the elves are the ones that get kicked out of their homeland and have to exit us back. It's like, and they're the really good race, quote unquote. So like, if you want to make that allegory, you're probably sticking it on the wrong people anyway. But
Yeah,
it's just
one of my reasons of wanting to read this finally is I wanted to know more about the genre history of dwarves, because dwarves are really fun.
well,
and-
dwarves weren't part of the plan. It was
Were they?
elves, no, elves and men, and one of the Valar decided he wanted to create for himself. Aule, I think it was the smith, and he's like, I'm gonna make some shit, and he makes dwarves, and they're kind of these like simple rudimentary things at first, and you know, it's kind of a Abraham and Isaac thing. Like God tells him, no, not part of the plan, kill them. And so when he goes to do it and they show fear, he spares them. He's like, well, no, hold on, chill out. We'll rework this. We can workshop this. We're just gonna put them to sleep like the rest of them for a while, and they'll wake up again. And you can keep your dwarves. And that's how they.
that sounds vaguely familiar, but that's fun. I mean, dwarves are my people in general. Like the
Yeah.
only thing that's ironic about that is the fact that I'm like 6 feet tall and, you know, twice as tall as a regular dwarf.
Oh yeah, no, I much more
whole-
identify with dwarves than
Love
the
dwarves.
others.
Right. Cantankerous, ready to fight. I mean, the love of gold and whatever, fine, but
Oh,
you
shiny
know,
things,
Yeah.
but-
Sure.
Yeah.
I'm waiting for my
yeah.
pallet of money that you were promising earlier. So
Right. Yeah, so now I've got an awkward delivery that but and I mean some of that is interesting too, because it's like their whole like love for money, it's like some of that is natural, but some of that is magically exacerbated as well with, you know, gold sickness and the Arkenstone and shit like that, where it's just like, yeah, dwarves like shiny things, but you know, evil leaned on that and made it worse. You
well,
know,
even
and-
their rings were that's
um,
like they started
right.
delving ever deeper, and that's like Durin's Bane and all that shit was partially a result of getting their rings and making them like that's the thing. The dwarves are corrupted by the rings they get, the same as men are, except they're to a lesser degree where they just become more of themselves, and that
Right.
sort of takes them out of the fight in that way. And it fucks them over, but it doesn't really have broader implications on the world in the same way it does when men fall,
Right.
which, you know.
speaking of dwarves and Rings of Power we touched on earlier, another friend of mine is a big Lord of the Rings fan. Like he's like, when you watch the trailer, it's like that's it. That's where like he didn't even get to watch it. That's where already when it broke the camel's back. It's like the dwarven women don't have beards. I'm out.
Yeah, and I mean, I got into some of the posts that were going back and forth, like in the Lord of the Rings subreddit and stuff, and it's like, I think I do mostly ascribe to the fact that they should have had beards, but there is so plenty enough leeway to go the other direction, in my opinion, because like the whole crux of it seemed to chalk up to like one passage. That it was like, that they
That
were
might have
virtually
been a joke.
indistinguishable or whatever. But
Right.
yeah,
But I mean, there are bigger arguments there, and we probably should have a very long, drawn out fight about Rings of Power. So maybe we should try to avoid discussions of that, because otherwise we will start fighting.
We're only going to start fighting if somebody says it's actually good, and that's not going to happen.
I have the worst hot take in history. I think it was mostly just okay. I had problems with it, but I didn't hate it. There,
I
you can
actually
crucify me now.
It was was it the most expensive show ever on the level that it should have been? No. Was it just okay? Like you said, yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. It was okay.
I'm gonna go get pitchforks.
As Jonathan was saying in the chat about Dragon Slayers, I mean, you talk about the history of the dwarves. Like they got wars with orcs all on their own. They got wars with dragons all on their own. Like the dwarves get up to some shit the entire time.
And I mean the way that they've flanderized, I guess, into the fantasy genre, eventually it comes back to Tolkien, so I wanted to start there. But like the Warhammer fantasy dwarves and the ridiculous shit, but like the mixture of the Nordic folklore plus something else, just like they're so much fun. And then kind of because of a Tolkien history that they got the Scottish accents, which stuck, and I believe that it should stick. Like I don't know if it's a hot take, but I firmly believe all dwarves should have Scottish accents.
All dwarves in my D&D campaigns have Scottish accents.
Well, Scottish or like incomprehensible Welsh accents would be acceptable too, I think. Like, a couple of them in The Hobbit, like that one that you can't understand a fucking word he's saying except Gandalf seems to. I'm pretty sure, to me, I just ascribe that to being Welsh. Like if you ever listen to a Welsh person speak.
I will not pass judgment on Welsh yet. I don't remember that character. So, but either very strong Scottish accents or incomprehensible in other ways. But I think that came out of a BBC play or a radio play of something, or versions of all of these voice actors that are trying to do all of these many characters, and they needed to differentiate them. So they gave them accents, and it stuck. And I love
Makes sense.
Yeah, but it's also like the Scottish personality and the like a Nordic Viking personality, they meld so well, and so it sticks to the
drinking
DNA.
And fighting. Okay.
Yeah. Drinking and fighting and being very angry and don't touch my beard, and
it's pretty much still like that around here.
Yeah. I love dwarves. And yeah, that was my motivation for finally getting to the point of reading this book.
Oh, if you love dwarves, then you probably should read the Silmarillion and stuff, because it goes into more of their, like, it's very dwarf. I mean, it's very everything heavy, but you're going to get it to, like they were commissioned. The whole reason they're antagonistic towards elves is kind of their fault at the outset, because they're commissioned to do some shit with the Silmaril and they won't give it back. And it's like, well, okay, now we're going to start fighting.
Yes, the fighting with Gimli and the elves, and especially in Fellowship of the Ring when they go to Lothlorien and he says nasty things to them. It's like, that was not courteous. Do not say that. And then like he gets all swayed over, and the gift from Galadriel was 3 hairs from her head. It's just, I love the weird ridiculousness.
Which as another thing, there is deep lore on why that is crazy, stupid, significant as well. It's not just like, oh, look at Gimli, how adorable he is, which he is also pretty much like the only dwarf that doesn't succumb to gold sickness, right? But like even before that, I loved him at Rivendell, like especially the movie. So John Rhys Davies, fucking amazing casting. One of my favorite actors in like
so much
up
in
to this
movies.
point. Yeah, like, but he's always like kind of a background character, right? He's always kind of like a B character, but he is such a personality in this. And when he's like, what are we waiting for? Let's destroy it now. Just like smashes the fucking thing. And then his line is like one of the best lines in media later, which is like, that like we gotta go to Gondor and help him. And like, small chance of success, high chance
Certainty of death, small chance of
like,
success.
what are we waiting for? Like he is so perfect for shit like that,
He's definitely one of my favorite parts.
It's the comic relief, right? Like kind of like Merry and Pippin, also kind of the comic relief, but they get more
Merry and
serious
Pippin
as they go off on their own in the movies, at least.
Yeah.
But he's kind of like, but he does it. It toes the line so well. Like it doesn't get too much. He doesn't get too silly, and the humor like is really like it's really the reason why people like Legolas so much, I feel, is largely Gimli's arc and the actor playing him more so than the blandness that is Legolas.
I mean, so different humors though too, right? Merry and Pippin are absolutely slapstick. They're absolutely just like totally crass body humor, like, oh, I tripped and fell and I'm such a klutz kind of humor. Whereas like Gimli is the straight guy. He is absolutely fucking serious about everything that comes out of his mouth, but he's just made a fool every time.
On a short distance.
Yes.
Well, that's the thing. It's funny because when he's with Legolas, if you were saying that, like Legolas would be the straight man in that, except they're both straight men. It's just a matter of their versions of straight men are so dichotomous that it comes off as an Abbott and Costello type thing, where it's like,
I mean,
not to that degree, but you get that vibe where it's like Legolas is taking this deadly seriously. Gimli is too. He's just funnier about it.
He's bad at it, because like Lothlorien, when they're going in and be like, you gotta keep your eyes and ears open, and dwarves, they got
this is one dwarf she won't sneak up on. Oh,
he's got an arrow right in his face already.
At the Battle of Helm's Deep.
I think that's the one line they cut out of that's in the theatrical that they cut out of the extended one that I like a lot, where he's like, these woods are perilous. We should go back. And he's got an arrow in his face.
Nice.
At the Battle of Helm's Deep, I always remember because everything starts with archers, and Legolas was able to start firing things and killing things in their competition, and then Gimli is standing on the battlement going like, come on, get here, I need to kill you. Like 17, 18,
like he does want to kill, he does want to fight, but it's like,
so
okay, so he's got to wait. He's got to range.
The funniest moment for me at a Helm's Deep battle is like, should I explain it to you? Should I get you a box?
It's his reaction too. It's like, you little shit.
Or it's toss me. Don't tell the elf.
Yes. Right. I cannot jump the distance. You have to toss me. Don't tell the elf. Not
He's so good. The extended version where he tries to drink Legolas under the table.
Oh yeah.
And Legolas is like, I think I'm starting to feel something.
Right.
and like Eomer's looking at him like, dude, what are you?
Gimli's so drunk he's gone cross-eyed.
Yep.
Or even at the end of the battle where it's like he was twitching. He was twitching because he's got my axe in his nervous
system.
We gotta watch the movies after each one.
No, I think his best line still to me is that still only counts as one. Like, it's just, it's absolutely perfect because he's looking at it and
that's uncharitable, really.
Well, no, he's impressed, but he just cannot give it to him. And he's like, and he is correct technically.
Right.
It's quality versus quantity, but still. Yeah, okay. I'm down with this idea to rewatch the movies.
They got 40 guys or something on the back. They gotta count.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. That was always like, man, he put in work to catch up with Legolas anyway, because Legolas had him by like 20 by the time Gimli even starts killing anyone.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, no, Gimli was putting in work after that. But I mean, Legolas had other things.
His physical humor is so good too, with the travel to Helm's Deep, and like he gets one it's the warg on him. Oh, no, it's an org on him, then a warg. He's like the ooh and the smelling and
Yeah.
Well, even when he gets thrown off the horse after he's talking about the beard, it's like that was deliberate.
Yes.
Love that movie.
And then he has to get back on the horse. It's like, I'm a fighter. Get me up here.
Oh yeah, we gotta.
All right, so this, I'm on board with this.
The
whole
movies are better than
rewatching.
the books.
I was gonna say I just rewatched them a couple weeks ago anyway, but
But who
doesn't
cares?
matter.
Like
I already
we'll
watched
continue reading them,
Mhm.
but I don't think I want to wait to watch all of the stuff at the end. So I just want to like read and watch at the same time. I've already basically rewatched the first one. I will finish book 2 of book 1 and rewatch it again.
Yeah, it sounds
Get
like
up.
good. And you know that gives us more content, and content's
And
great.
you know the fans are just like
Now,
dying.
if
for
you enjoy our
Well,
content, you can support us.
Jonathan,
on our
at least, is a
Patreon page.
dedicated viewer.
Oh, listen, we got to take what we can get on our off days, and this is our off day. So
I really feel like I made a good segue there, and you guys just
no, I heard it, but it's because you kind of froze, so no one was paying
Did they
attention.
hear it though?
Oh.
So
Try again.
Well, do it again. Write it in
Take
chat,
two.
guys. We need money because Andreas still lives in a backwards fourth world country, and we need to get him over here ASAP.
Healthcare, everybody gets an education without having to pay
Yeah,
for
yeah.
it.
As long as you support the party and the government, and
You know.
all that other good shit.
But yeah, we have
Here's
a
another-
Patreon.
here's
You can
another
go
hot
on.
take. What if I bring Costco to where you are? Will you bring me to your country? So
Yeah,
Well, you have to bring like an actual Costco warehouse. You can't just bring the pizza.
the whole thing.
Yeah, the whole thing.
Luckily, we've all got tanker-sized vehicles that we can just like load things up like that.
Well,
So-
if our generous Patreons sort of bump up a little
mean,
bit,
with
we
enough
can
money
open a Costco. There's got to be
to-
warehouses somewhere in
Maybe
Sweden
make
to
the
open up.
Costco tier. If you support us on the Costco tier,
right.
Oh, that's
my God.
do it. Set up a Costco
We'll
tier
open
where
a
it's
franchise.
$1,000 a month. Please set up the Costco tier.
I
That's
would I wanna
Jonathan.
be the one
Jonathan
person
will sign up for the
who's ever
Costco tier, and then Cody will follow
ever
up
get a
afterwards.
Costco tier Patreon.
It may have to be 10,000 a month. We're a little behind that we didn't think of this before.
We
Mm.
might need to update our Patreon.
But yeah, you can support us there. Then you can come yell at us about all the takes that are wrong in Lord of the Rings on our Discord.
Yeah,
And we will reply with gifts.
and/or insults of our own.
With GIFs and perhaps words.
Not GIFs. We're still not. We're never going to
Every time
reply
you
with
say
peanut
GIF,
butter.
A gift.
Ever.
We're taking away a slice of pizza.
Hey,
Yeah.
okay. One thing's trolling with GIF versus GIF, right? Another thing's threading on the pizza, right? That's a no bueno.
Well, that's how you know this is a serious discussion.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
All right. Yes, Patreon. Join us on Discord. Gifts. And we'll continue this soon.
At a later date to be determined.
That's okay. Ray does not see this episode.